The story opens with the stark, unforgiving landscape of the western frontier, where the sun beats relentlessly on dry, cracked earth, and the wind carries dust across the endless plains. In this harsh environment, life is a constant struggle, and survival is never guaranteed. Against this backdrop lives the cowboy, a man whose rugged exterior hints at years of hardship, toil, and resilience. He is a widower, left alone to care for his infant child, a responsibility he neither anticipated nor fully feels prepared for. His small ranch, modest and weathered, reflects his solitary existence. A simple cabin with a lean-to barn, a few scattered horses, and fields that barely yield enough to sustain them. The emptiness of the land mirrors the emptiness he feels within, both for the loss of his wife and for the lack of help or companionship. The cowboy rises before dawn, his day beginning with the exhausting chores that keep the ranch barely functional. He saddles horses, repairs fences, and tends to livestock, all the while feeling the constant ache of fatigue in his muscles. Despite his strength and experience with the land, there is a deep vulnerability in him, a quiet fear that he might fail in his new role as both provider and caregiver. Every sound, the distant cry of a hawk, the rustle of dry grass, even the faint creak of the cabin door, reminds him of the delicate balance he must maintain. He has faced challenges before, but nothing compares to the helpless cries of a newborn, whose needs are immediate, unrelenting, and entirely dependent on him. The baby, a fragile little being wrapped in a faded blanket, stirs in the corner of the cabin. Its tiny fists clench in hunger, and its cries pierce the quiet of the morning, sharp and urgent. The cowboy approaches the crib, his boots scuffing against the wooden floor, and lifts his child into his arms. There is tenderness in his touch, but also a stark realization of his limitations. He is strong with the animals and the land, but here in the intimate world of infancy, he is inexperienced, unsure, and anxious. His wife, the mother who once filled this space with warmth and guidance, is gone, and he feels the weight of that absence more keenly than ever. The child's eyes, wide and searching, meet his, and he senses not just hunger but a need for comfort, for safety, and for love. It is a responsibility that overwhelms him, yet it also ignites a determination within him that he has never known before. The cowboy's day unfolds with a mixture of routine labor and constant vigilance. Each step on the property reminds him of the fragility of their existence. Supplies are low, and he knows the challenges of living in isolation. A delayed shipment from town could mean hunger, illness, or worse. He feels the sting of solitude. Not only the absence of neighbors, but the absence of guidance, companionship, and shared burdens. His mind constantly cycles through worries. Will he be able to feed the child today? Can he manage the ranch alone? What will happen when sickness strikes or winter arrives? Despite his outward toughness, the cowboy is painfully aware of his vulnerability. Yet amid this struggle, there is a quiet, almost imperceptible strength. His love for his child is a driving force, pushing him to keep going even when exhaustion threatens to overtake him. He adjusts blankets, hums softly, and rocks the baby gently, his voice a tender contrast to the harsh winds outside. In this opening chapter, the reader sees not only the hardships of frontier life, but also the emergence of a father's devotion, a devotion that will propel the story forward, shaping every choice, every act of courage, and ultimately, every connection he forms with others in this lonely, challenging world. The morning air on the ranch is still, save for the faint rustle of dry grass and the distant lowing of cattle. Yet, in the small cabin at the edge of the property, a sound cuts through the silence with sharp urgency, the desperate, piercing cry of the cowboy's infant. Unlike the gentle coos of a healthy, content baby, this cry is insistent, almost frantic, echoing through the bare wooden walls. It is a sound that grips the cowboy's heart and refuses to let go, a reminder of his child's fragility and his own helplessness. He moves quickly, stumbling slightly over the worn floorboards, arms outstretched, his every thought consumed by the tiny life depending entirely on him. The baby's wails grow louder, demanding attention that the cowboy struggles to provide. He tries the usual comforts, rocking, humming, adjusting the blankets. Each effort brings only a momentary pause before the cries resume, stronger and more urgent. He recognizes the sound, hunger, not discomfort, not fear. His chest tightens with worry. He knows the dangers of an infant going without nourishment, especially in these harsh frontier conditions. But here lies the cruel irony: he has little to offer. The cupboards are nearly bare, the store in town is days away, and the infant's need cannot wait. Each second that passes feels like an eternity, and every cry is a hammering reminder of his inadequacy. As the cowboy holds the baby closer, he studies the child's tiny, trembling features. The furrowed brow, the pursed lips, the quivering fists. The raw vulnerability of the infant strikes him like a physical blow. He knows that life on the ranch has always demanded toughness, grit, and self-reliance. He has faced stampedes, storms, and injuries, yet none of these experiences have prepared him for this: the helpless, unrelenting dependency of a newborn. The weight of responsibility presses down on him in a way that is both new and terrifying. Every instinct he has tells him to act, to provide, to protect, but action is limited by circumstance. The cries are not merely sounds. They are emotional currents that stir something deep within the cowboy. He feels guilt, frustration, fear, and profound love all at once. He whispers the baby's name repeatedly, his voice raw, soft, and shaky, as if mere words could soothe hunger. "Hold on, little one. I'll find a way." But even as he says it, he knows the truth. The solution lies beyond his hands and skills alone. The realization that he cannot fully meet this need alone strikes a chord of desperation. Outside, the ranch is quiet, and the world seems indifferent to the small human struggle inside the cabin. The wind rattles the cabin walls, and the distant prairie stretches on endlessly, a stark reminder of their isolation. There is no neighbor to call upon, no friendly face to bring help. The cowboy is forced to confront the limits of his own endurance, the tension between pride and necessity, and the sheer difficulty of survival in this unforgiving land. He must navigate not only the physical hardships, but the emotional storm of feeling powerless in the face of his child's suffering. Amid the turmoil, however, the baby's cry also acts as a catalyst. It stirs the cowboy's resourcefulness and determination. He begins to think creatively, recalling old remedies, improvising makeshift feeding solutions, and planning trips to the town despite the dangers and effort required. The sound of the infant's wailing transforms into a call to action, a call that will drive the cowboy to seek help and ultimately set the stage for the appearance of another character, whose kindness and generosity will change their lives. This moment, though filled with tension and despair, underscores a universal truth. Love can be both a source of vulnerability and strength. The baby's cry, unrelenting and pure, exposes the cowboy's humanity, his weaknesses, and his courage. It is the first emotional turning point in the story, establishing the stakes and creating a sense of urgency that propels the narrative forward. Through the baby's cries, readers understand the fragility of life on the frontier, the depth of parental love, and the profound impact that even a small act of kindness can have in moments of desperate need. The cowboy's life on the frontier is defined not just by the land and the labor it demands, but by the stark isolation that surrounds him. His ranch sits miles from the nearest settlement, a lone outpost amid rolling plains and jagged hills, where the wind carries the scent of dust and wild grass rather than human presence. This isolation is a double-edged sword. It grants him freedom and control over his life, yet it leaves him without support in moments of urgent need. When the cries of his hungry baby pierce the silence, the cowboy feels the weight of his solitude acutely. There is no neighbor to offer a quick solution, no family to share the burden, no friendly voice to reassure him that he is not alone in his struggles. Each sound of the prairie, whether the distant howl of a coyote or the rustle of dry grass in the wind, serves as a reminder that he and his child are entirely on their own. Despite this isolation, the cowboy is part of a broader, if distant, community. A few homesteads dot the horizon, and a small town lies several miles beyond the hills. He knows the people there by sight, though interactions are infrequent and often formal. The sheriff nods politely when he passes through. The shopkeeper recognizes him but rarely lingers for conversation, and neighbors, while friendly in passing, are preoccupied with their own survival. The frontier fosters a rugged independence. People are expected to manage their own affairs. Asking for help is not only inconvenient but carries a subtle stigma. Pride and self-reliance are virtues that define the cowboy's identity. Yet in moments like these, facing the unyielding cries of a hungry infant, they feel like chains that prevent him from seeking the aid he desperately needs. The emotional toll of isolation is compounded by the physical demands of ranch life. Every task, from feeding and watering livestock to repairing fences and tending the fields, must be done alone, often under harsh weather conditions. The cowboy rises before dawn, works tirelessly through the day, and rests only briefly before repeating the cycle. In such an environment, exhaustion seeps into both body and mind, leaving little room for the mental and emotional energy required to care for a newborn. His interactions with the sparse community are transactional. He trades labor, buys supplies, and exchanges pleasantries, but genuine emotional connection is rare. The lack of support magnifies his anxiety and feelings of inadequacy, particularly as he contends with the fragility of his infant's life. Yet isolation also shapes the cowboy's character in profound ways. It has honed his resilience, patience, and problem-solving skills. He knows how to anticipate the land's needs, how to mend tools with limited resources, and how to survive in a place where nature is as formidable an opponent as any human adversary. These skills, forged in solitude, will be crucial as the story unfolds. However, the cowboy is beginning to learn that some challenges, especially those involving human vulnerability, cannot be overcome alone. The cries of his baby are a stark reminder that no amount of skill or strength can replace the kindness, compassion, and assistance of others. The isolation also primes the narrative for the introduction of a new character, a struggling mother, whose own life is fraught with hardship, but who possesses the courage and generosity to bridge the gap between loneliness and support. Her arrival will not only provide immediate relief, but will also challenge the cowboy's notions of pride and self-reliance, showing him that trust and community are essential, even in a world that demands independence. Through the lens of community and isolation, readers gain a sense of the frontier's dual nature. It is a place of opportunity and freedom, but also of hardship and vulnerability. The cowboy's solitude highlights the stakes of his situation, emphasizing both the physical and emotional challenges of raising a child in such an environment. It also lays the groundwork for a theme that will resonate throughout the story: the transformative power of compassion, connection, and human kindness in a harsh, often unforgiving world. The quiet of the ranch is suddenly pierced by a new presence, one that promises both hope and complication. Enter the struggling mother, a woman whose life has been shaped by hardship, yet whose spirit remains unbroken. Unlike the cowboy, whose challenges are largely physical and logistical, her struggles are both practical and deeply personal. She carries the weight of poverty, perhaps the responsibility of other children, or the exhaustion of laboring day after day to survive. Her hands are calloused, her clothes worn, and her eyes reflect both fatigue and fierce determination. She is familiar with scarcity, yet she possesses a capacity for empathy and courage that distinguishes her. The mother comes across the cowboy's ranch either by chance or necessity. Perhaps she is traveling to trade goods, seek work, or simply pass through on her way home. She hears the unmistakable cries of the infant before she sees the cabin, and her maternal instincts react immediately. Her own struggles make her keenly aware of the fragility of a newborn, and she cannot ignore a child in distress. The sound of the baby's cries resonates with her own experiences, stirring a mix of sympathy, urgency, and resolve. Despite knowing the risks of approaching strangers or imposing herself, she is compelled to act. Her initial observation of the cowboy is cautious. She notes the man's rugged appearance, the tension etched into his posture, and the desperation in his eyes as he cradles the infant. She sees a father who is capable yet clearly overwhelmed, whose pride and self-reliance may prevent him from asking for help. At the same time, she recognizes that he is not unkind. There is tenderness in the way he holds the baby, in the soft murmurs he offers, and in the protective way he moves. Her empathy drives her to approach, but she does so with care, understanding the delicate balance between offering help and overstepping boundaries. The mother's internal conflict is palpable. She is struggling herself, aware that offering assistance could strain her own limited resources. She may be hungry, tired, or facing her own urgent responsibilities. Yet, the decision to act transcends personal inconvenience. In her, the story introduces a theme that will resonate throughout: courage in compassion. She chooses to prioritize the well-being of another, even at a cost to herself, demonstrating the quiet heroism that often goes unnoticed in harsh, unforgiving environments. As she steps closer to the cabin, she assesses the situation pragmatically. She observes what the cowboy has on hand, noting the scarcity of supplies and the evident exhaustion in his movements. Her mind races to determine how she can provide relief. Perhaps she carries milk or has access to resources he does not. She considers how best to approach him, aware that pride and self-reliance can make asking or offering help a delicate matter. Her approach is careful but determined, a blend of practicality and maternal instinct. Her presence immediately shifts the emotional tone of the story. Where the narrative had been dominated by tension, worry, and isolation, her arrival introduces a glimmer of hope. The baby's cries, once a source of despair for the cowboy, now hint at the possibility of relief. The mother's willingness to help begins to break through the barriers of solitude and pride, suggesting that even in the harshest conditions, human connection and kindness can make a tangible difference. Moreover, her character establishes the potential for deeper bonds beyond immediate assistance. She embodies resilience, empathy, and the possibility of partnership, foreshadowing a dynamic that will evolve as the story progresses. In a world defined by scarcity and struggle, her actions underscore a universal truth. Sometimes survival is not just about strength or skill, but about the courage to reach out, even when one is struggling oneself. By the time the cowboy notices her, readers sense the transformative potential of her presence. She is more than a passerby. She is a catalyst for change. Her arrival signals the turning point of the narrative, where despair begins to give way to hope, and where the rigid walls of isolation start to crumble in the face of compassion, generosity, and shared humanity. The moment of the first encounter between the struggling mother and the cowboy is tense, fragile, and charged with emotion. The cowboy, already on edge from the baby's relentless cries and his own sense of helplessness, is startled by the sudden appearance of another person at his cabin. He instinctively tightens his hold on the infant, a protective reflex born from both love and fear. His eyes, scanning the approaching figure, are wary. In his isolated world, strangers are rare, and any interruption can carry risk, social, emotional, or even physical. Yet the woman approaching is not threatening. She moves with deliberate caution, her steps measured and her eyes soft but determined. There is a quiet confidence in her demeanor that immediately distinguishes her from passers-by he might have dismissed or feared. The mother's first glance at the baby evokes an immediate emotional response. She sees the small, trembling figure wrapped in a threadbare blanket, the wide, hungry eyes, and the tiny fists clenching in desperation. Memories of her own struggles, late nights nursing her children, moments of exhaustion when food was scarce, the anxiety of keeping her family safe, flash through her mind. Her empathy is instant, unfiltered, and compelling. Despite her own hardships, her instincts push her to act. This is not a calculated decision, but a visceral reaction driven by compassion and maternal care. When she speaks for the first time, her voice is gentle but firm. "Is the baby hungry?" she asks, the simplicity of the question underscoring both her concern and her practical mindset. The cowboy's initial response is a mix of surprise, relief, and pride. Relief that someone has noticed his struggle and may be able to help. Surprise at the boldness of this stranger who approaches without hesitation, and a touch of guarded pride that prevents him from immediately asking for aid. There is an unspoken tension. He wants help, yet he fears the vulnerability of accepting it. Pride and instinct tell him to manage on his own. Desperation tells him to trust. Their first few moments together are filled with small, telling gestures rather than extended conversation. The mother reaches into her satchel or apron to reveal what she has brought: a bottle, a container of milk, or supplies to feed the infant. The cowboy watches her carefully, his expression softening as he observes her sincerity. There is a subtle negotiation in their interaction, a dance of understanding, pride, and mutual respect. He must gauge her intentions. She must gauge his willingness to accept help. Every movement is cautious, deliberate, and revealing. The baby, sensing the presence of another caring adult, reacts instinctively. Its cries begin to lessen as the mother carefully approaches, her hands steady and reassuring. The cowboy watches, amazed at the immediate effect her calm presence has on the child. He feels a complex mix of gratitude, relief, and something more profound, a budding trust in this woman who, despite her own challenges, has chosen to extend herself on behalf of his child. During this first encounter, subtle character traits are revealed on both sides. The cowboy's underlying tenderness and capacity for care are made visible through his protective instincts, while the mother's courage, empathy, and resilience shine through in her willingness to approach and offer assistance. This interaction establishes the emotional foundation for their developing connection. It is not yet friendship or alliance, but the spark of mutual understanding and respect. This first encounter is pivotal for the story. It marks the point where isolation begins to crack, where despair is met with hope, and where the narrative's central theme, human compassion in the face of struggle, is made tangible. The baby's cries, once a source of tension and helplessness, become a bridge between two people, uniting them through shared care and concern. In this quiet, emotionally charged moment, readers sense the potential for transformation, both for the cowboy and for the mother, as well as for the child whose need has brought them together. The tension in the cabin begins to shift as the struggling mother moves closer, her presence a quiet force of reassurance amid the chaos of the baby's cries. She knows that words alone are insufficient. Action is required. With careful, deliberate movements, she reaches into her bag and retrieves a small bottle of milk she had saved for her own child or acquired earlier that day. Her hands are steady despite the weight of exhaustion and worry that clings to her like a shadow. This moment is simple in action but monumental in significance. She is offering a part of herself, her resources, her energy, and her compassion to someone in desperate need. The cowboy watches her closely, initially frozen by a mixture of surprise, pride, and apprehension. His mind races with conflicting emotions. Pride tells him to manage on his own. He has always been self-reliant, and the idea of accepting help feels like an admission of weakness. Yet desperation, the raw, gnawing kind that comes from seeing his infant suffer, forces him to reconsider. The sight of the mother leaning gently toward the baby, the soft determination in her eyes, begins to chip away at his defenses. For a man who has relied on his strength and independence to survive, this is a moment of vulnerability. Yet it is also the beginning of an awakening. He is learning that survival is sometimes a shared endeavor, that human connection can be as vital as any skill or tool. The mother speaks softly, her tone blending reassurance with practicality. "Here, let me help," she says, presenting the bottle to the cowboy. Her words carry no judgment, no condescension, only genuine concern. She understands the delicate balance of pride and need. Her offer is not an imposition but an invitation, leaving the cowboy the dignity of choice. There is a subtle tension in the cabin. The cowboy must decide whether to accept this help, knowing it may alter the dynamics of their relationship forever. As the baby is fed, the atmosphere in the room changes almost imperceptibly. The infant's cries soften to contented coos, and the tiny fingers wrap instinctively around the bottle. Relief floods the cowboy's features as he watches his child nourished, a sense of gratitude mingling with humility. For the first time that day, he feels a flicker of hope that the impossible might become manageable. This simple act of offering milk is not just about sustenance. It is a profound moment of human connection, a bridge between two lives previously separated by isolation, pride and circumstance. The mother's help extends beyond the immediate practical need. She brings calmness, reassurance, and emotional support, qualities the cowboy has lacked since his wife passed. Her presence allows him a rare moment to exhale, to acknowledge that he is not failing, and to recognize that he is part of a world where compassion still exists. Through her actions, she demonstrates that true courage is not measured by self-sufficiency alone, but by the willingness to act for the benefit of others, even when one is struggling oneself. In these moments, the narrative highlights the complexity of human interaction under strain. The cowboy and the mother navigate unspoken emotions: gratitude, pride, vulnerability, and respect. Each glance, each movement communicates volumes. The baby, too, plays a silent but pivotal role, its needs forcing the characters into intimacy and cooperation. Through this act of offering help, boundaries begin to blur and trust begins to take root. The story uses this part to underscore the central theme of compassion as a transformative force. The act of giving and accepting aid becomes a turning point. It relieves immediate suffering and lays the groundwork for a deeper relationship. It shows that human connection, even in its simplest form, can alter the trajectory of lives, offering hope, security, and emotional sustenance in addition to the physical. The cabin, once a place of tension and isolation, becomes a space where empathy and generosity are tangible, life-changing forces. The atmosphere in the cabin shifts as the baby's cries gradually subside, replaced by soft, contented coos. The struggling mother sits close to the cowboy, her hands still gently supporting the infant as he drinks, and in that simple act, a profound bond begins to form. It is a moment of quiet intimacy, where the urgency of survival gives way to human connection, and the walls of isolation that have defined the cowboy's life begin to crack. In this space, the baby becomes the bridge between two solitary adults, connecting them through shared care, mutual concern, and unspoken understanding. The cowboy watches with a mixture of relief, gratitude, and a tentative curiosity. He had faced countless challenges on the frontier: storms, injuries, lost cattle, and harsh winters, but none had brought him to a moment as emotionally raw and transformative as this. Observing the mother's careful attention to his child, he begins to notice small details: the way she speaks softly to the baby, the gentle rhythm of her hands as they steady the bottle, the way her eyes never leave the child's face. These subtle gestures convey compassion, competence, and warmth, qualities he has longed for since the passing of his wife. He realizes that while he has the strength to endure physical hardship, he has been starved for emotional connection and trust, and this moment offers a taste of both. For the mother, the act of caring for the baby is equally significant. Her own struggles, whether scarcity, fatigue, or past hardships, fade momentarily as she focuses on the infant in her arms. She feels a deep sense of purpose and fulfillment, knowing that her presence has alleviated suffering and brought comfort. There is a quiet pride in being able to help, tempered by humility, as she understands the fragility of life in this harsh environment. Her empathy is not performative. It is instinctive, born from experience and a recognition of the shared vulnerability that connects all human beings. The baby, sensing the calm and attentive energy of the mother, responds with trust and contentment. Tiny fingers curl around her hand, eyelids flutter in sleepy relaxation, and a soft gurgle escapes as the child feeds. The cowboy feels an emotional shift within himself. Where there was panic and helplessness, there is now relief, a tentative hope, and a growing appreciation for the mother's presence. This bonding moment, though centered around the infant, extends naturally to the two adults. It becomes clear that the baby's welfare has drawn them together in a way that words alone could not. As the baby's feeding continues, small conversations begin to flow. The cowboy expresses his gratitude, initially awkward and halting, while the mother responds with gentle reassurance. These exchanges, though simple, are laden with meaning. They signal the beginning of trust and mutual understanding, the recognition that while each of them has faced immense personal struggle, cooperation and kindness can alleviate suffering in ways that self-reliance alone cannot. The shared attention to the infant becomes a metaphor for the broader theme of the story, that compassion and care can bridge isolation, heal emotional wounds, and create lasting connections. Physically, the scene is intimate but non-intrusive. The mother sits on the edge of the cabin's rough wooden bench, the baby cradled carefully in her arms, while the cowboy stands close, hands hovering protectively, ready to step in if needed. The simplicity of the setting, the faded blankets, the warm sunlight streaming through the window, the quiet hum of the prairie outside, underscores the purity of the moment. It is a tableau of trust, patience, and human kindness. By the end of this bonding moment, the cowboy begins to internalize a new truth, that vulnerability is not weakness, and that accepting help can coexist with strength and dignity. Similarly, the mother experiences the quiet reward of making a tangible difference in another person's life. The baby, once frantic and hungry, is calm, nourished, and secure. This turning point sets the stage for the deepening relationships and emotional growth that will continue to unfold in the story, emphasizing that even in the harshest environments, human connection is both a necessity and a source of profound hope. As the baby drifts into a contented sleep, the cabin is filled with a quiet calm that contrasts sharply with the chaos of earlier cries. In this stillness, the cowboy and the struggling mother begin to notice each other not merely as individuals tied to necessity, but as people shaped by hardship, resilience, and compassion. The bond formed through the shared care of the infant opens a space for conversation, reflection, and mutual recognition. It is in these moments that mutual understanding, beyond mere cooperation, begins to take root. The cowboy, who has long relied on solitude and self-reliance, finds himself unexpectedly willing to share fragments of his life. He speaks hesitantly at first, revealing his struggles with managing the ranch alone, the grief of losing his wife, and the constant worry for his child's well-being. There is a vulnerability in his words, a rare admission that he cannot face every challenge alone. For a man who has prided himself on independence, this disclosure is both difficult and transformative. By trusting another with the truth of his situation, he begins to break down the walls of isolation that have defined his life for years. The mother, in turn, opens up about her own hardships. She shares her experiences of scarcity, the daily grind of survival, and the worries that accompany caring for her own family. Her voice carries both strength and weariness, revealing that her compassion is not born of ease, but of lived struggle. She demonstrates resilience, ingenuity, and empathy, qualities that the cowboy recognizes and deeply respects. As she speaks, he sees not only a helper, but a person whose life experiences mirror his own in intensity and perseverance, though expressed through different circumstances. This recognition of shared humanity forms the foundation for genuine understanding between them. Their conversation is punctuated by moments of silence, where words are unnecessary. In these pauses, they observe each other's actions and responses, the careful way the mother adjusts the baby's blanket, the protective posture of the cowboy as he watches them both. These silent cues communicate respect, trust, and a growing sense of partnership. Through these small, unspoken gestures, the characters begin to understand that they can rely on one another, not just in immediate crisis, but as companions in facing the ongoing challenges of life on the frontier. A sense of empathy permeates the dialogue. The cowboy begins to comprehend the sacrifices the mother has made, her courage in the face of adversity, and her capacity for selflessness despite her own hardships. He recognizes that her willingness to help is a reflection not just of kindness, but of moral strength, a quality he admires and finds increasingly comforting. Conversely, the mother perceives the cowboy's dedication, tenderness, and quiet heroism. She sees beyond the gruff exterior of a rugged frontiersman to the deeply caring father beneath. This reciprocal recognition strengthens the bond of mutual understanding, laying the groundwork for emotional trust and cooperation. Practical concerns also become part of their shared understanding. They discuss ways to care for the baby more effectively, plan for future challenges, and exchange insights about managing the difficulties of frontier life. These exchanges are practical yet intimate, reinforcing the idea that collaboration can transform vulnerability into resilience. Through mutual understanding, They begin to see that together they are more capable than they are apart, a subtle but significant lesson in interdependence and the value of human connection. By the end of this part, both characters have experienced a subtle but profound transformation. The cowboy feels relief and hope, realizing he is not alone in his struggle, while the mother experiences satisfaction and purpose in contributing meaningfully to the child's well-being. The baby, now peacefully asleep, symbolizes the bridge that connected them, while the shared experiences and empathy deepen the connection between the two adults. Mutual understanding has shifted their relationship from a simple act of assistance to a partnership grounded in trust, respect, and shared humanity. This turning point underscores the story's central theme, that in the midst of hardship, true strength often lies not in self-reliance alone, but in the courage to connect, understand, and support one another. The isolation that once defined the cowboy's life is beginning to dissolve, replaced by the promise of companionship, shared responsibility, and hope for the future. The immediate relief brought by the struggling mother's assistance with the baby begins to extend far beyond the cabin walls, creating ripple effects that touch the lives of all three characters and, eventually, the wider community. The baby, once inconsolable from hunger, now sleeps peacefully in a nourished and comforted state. This change, though small in scale, dramatically alters the emotional atmosphere of the ranch. The cowboy feels a weight lifted from his shoulders, a tension he had carried for days now easing as he witnesses the profound impact of kindness. It is a reminder that even the smallest acts of compassion can generate consequences far larger than anticipated. The cowboy himself experiences a subtle but meaningful transformation. His sense of pride, which had previously prevented him from seeking help, begins to shift. Through the mother's intervention, he learns that accepting assistance is not a sign of weakness, but an acknowledgement of the shared human experience. Everyone needs support at times. This realization begins to change his perspective on the world around him. He feels more open, less rigid, and more willing to consider that human connection and collaboration are essential elements of survival on the frontier. The isolation that had dominated his life for so long is now punctuated by hope and trust. The mother also experiences significant personal growth from her actions. Though she had approached the ranch out of compassion, she discovers an unexpected sense of fulfillment and purpose in helping the cowboy and his child. Her own hardships, scarcity, fatigue, and the relentless demands of survival are momentarily softened by the tangible impact of her care. By nourishing the baby and offering emotional support to the cowboy, she reinforces her sense of agency in a world where many of her circumstances feel beyond her control. The act of giving, though challenging for someone struggling herself, brings emotional reward, reinforcing the narrative's theme that empathy can empower as much as it alleviates suffering. The ripple effects are not confined to emotional and personal transformations. Practical outcomes emerge as well. The cowboy begins to consider how he might implement small changes to ensure that his child's needs are met more consistently. Inspired by the mother's initiative, he reorganizes his supplies, plans trips to town more efficiently, and even contemplates reaching out to other neighbors for support, something he might have previously resisted out of pride. The mother's intervention demonstrates that collaboration can enhance resilience, encouraging the cowboy to recognize that survival in isolation is far less effective than survival in community. On a broader scale, this act of kindness hints at its potential to influence the local community. Word of the mother's assistance may reach nearby settlers, demonstrating that compassion and mutual aid are not signs of weakness, but of strength and humanity. The story subtly suggests that one selfless act can inspire others, creating a culture of empathy in a harsh environment where every helping hand counts. In this way, the narrative underscores a broader moral. The smallest acts of care can generate far-reaching consequences, transforming not only individual lives but also the social fabric around them. The baby, as the catalyst for this transformation, symbolizes the interconnectedness of human experiences. Its vulnerability prompts adults to act with courage and compassion, and its well-being serves as a tangible measure of the success of these actions. The infant's calm and nurtured state reflects the positive consequences of shared care, highlighting that even the youngest and most powerless individuals can inspire profound changes in the lives of others. By the end of this part, the reader sees that the ripple effects are both emotional and practical, immediate and far-reaching. The cowboy gains renewed hope and willingness to accept help, the mother experiences empowerment and emotional reward, and the potential for broader community transformation is seeded. What began as a desperate cry in a lonely cabin has become a catalyst for trust, understanding, and collective resilience, emphasizing the story's central theme. In a world of struggle, compassion has the power to transform lives, strengthen bonds, and create lasting impact beyond the immediate moment. The story reaches its emotional and narrative culmination as the immediate crisis, the baby's hunger, is fully resolved, giving space for hope, renewal, and the lasting impact of human compassion. The baby, once crying desperately and clinging to discomfort, now rests in the cowboy's arms, fully nourished and content. The change is not merely physical. It radiates through the cabin, softening the tension and replacing fear with relief. In this quiet aftermath, the cowboy is able to reflect on the events that unfolded and recognize the profound difference a single act of kindness can make. The mother's intervention has not only saved the child from immediate suffering, but has also restored a sense of stability and emotional equilibrium to the father's life. For the cowboy, the resolution represents more than practical relief. It is a turning point in his emotional journey. He has been forced to confront the limits of isolation, pride, and self-reliance. And through this confrontation, he has learned a vital lesson about trust, collaboration, and human connection. The presence of the mother has shown him that vulnerability does not signify weakness, and that seeking or accepting help can strengthen rather than diminish one's character. As he observes the baby's peaceful slumber and the mother's careful, tender attention, he experiences a renewed sense of purpose and hope for the future. The hardships of the frontier remain, but they are now tempered by the realization that he is not alone, that compassion exists in the world, and that support can come when least expected but most needed. For the mother, the resolution solidifies the emotional reward of her courageous intervention. Despite her own struggles, scarcity, fatigue, and uncertainty, she has acted selflessly, and in doing so, she has reinforced her own sense of agency and moral strength. Her ability to make a tangible difference in another person's life, to calm and nurture the infant, and to provide comfort to the overwhelmed father, validates the resilience and empathy that define her character. She leaves the cabin not only with the satisfaction of having helped, but also with a reinforced belief in the power of human kindness. This experience will linger, shaping her perception of herself and of the value of her contributions in a world that often demands so much for so little. The baby, the central figure in this narrative, symbolizes hope and renewal itself. Its needs catalyzed the chain of events that brought two struggling adults together, forcing connection, cooperation, and emotional openness. In the resolution, the child becomes a living emblem of what can be achieved when compassion is exercised without hesitation. The infant's calm and nourished state is not merely an endpoint. It reflects the transformation in the adults around it, their ability to trust, to cooperate, and to extend themselves for another being's well-being, beyond the immediate family. The resolution hints at broader implications for the community. The story demonstrates that even in the harsh and isolating environment of the frontier, acts of kindness ripple outward, fostering trust, empathy, and cooperation among people who might otherwise remain distant. The cowboy, having experienced help firsthand, may be more willing to assist others in the future, while the mother's example reinforces the notion that generosity can create meaningful change, even when one's own circumstances are difficult. This underlines a central moral of the story. Hope and renewal are often seated in simple, compassionate actions. The cabin, once tense and filled with desperation, becomes a space of warmth, comfort, and emotional connection. The cowboy's heart is lighter, the mother's purpose reaffirmed, and the baby's needs met. The story closes on a note of emotional fulfillment, emphasizing the themes of resilience, empathy, and the transformative power of human kindness. In a world where survival is difficult and isolation is common, Hope is restored not through wealth or skill alone, but through compassion, courage, and the willingness to extend oneself for another. Ultimately, the resolution underscores that renewal, physical, emotional, and relational, is possible even in the most challenging circumstances. The story affirms that small acts of care can have profound, lasting effects, offering readers a poignant reminder of the enduring power of empathy, trust, and shared humanity.